Hello and welcome to Storyboard. This is Shibani Gharat. As India gears up for this year's elections, political parties have already started rolling out their election campaigns. Also, there is an increase in the number of fake news. On the sidelines of this year's FICCI Frames, Storyboard's Ankita Saxena caught up with Jim Egan, CEO of BBC Global News, and spoke to him about BBC's Beyond Fake News project and its relevance in the Indian political scenario and much more.
One of the problems that's been plaguing the news ecosystem for a while is fake news. What started as a chatter has now become a part of our mainstream conversation. Addressing this issue, I have with me Jim Egan, CEO of BBC Global News Limited. Jim, welcome to CNBC-TV18.
Hi.
So Jim, we are here to discuss a very burning, a very hot topic right now, which is plaguing the Indian news system, especially now as India gets into elections, and that's fake news. But firstly, before I get into details, I want you to define fake news for our viewers, because fake news is very dangerously becoming a term that people use when they don't like something, or probably if they hear an opinion of a person they don't like. So that is what they're defining as fake news. So I want you to clarify what fake news is.
Yeah, you're right. I think fake news is used as an insult or a dismissive remark, often when people just don't like something that they hear. And it's definitely not just an Indian issue, it's a global issue. And I think of fake news as something which is put out either by a media organization or an influential individual or even a government, which they either know to be false or they know is likely to undermine public confidence in something which has been established previously as a fact.
This whole momentum of fake news, it started in the US sometime during the US elections, and then it has now become a part of a mainstream conversation. However, the response to it hasn't been proportionate. But BBC is coming up with initiatives to curb fake news. What are those initiatives? And tell us about your program Beyond Fake News that you started last year in India.
Yeah, so I think that all organizations who consider themselves to be serious news publishers and broadcasters have a commitment to undertake serious initiatives to do something about fake news. The best way of doing that is, of course, through the journalism that we undertake on a day-to-day basis. But also there are some other initiatives. So for us, we've done a lot of work on media literacy, not just in the UK, but in other places around the world. And Beyond Fake News is the name of a project that we launched here in November last year. We're running a series of workshops in schools and colleges around India, working with young people to help them spot and deal with fake news. We also are running a daily service now in the run-up to the elections over the next couple of months called BBC Reality Check. This is something that we started 4 years ago in the UK around the general election there at the time. And our team in Delhi is going to be working with our teams around India on a daily basis to take talking points, issues of the day, claims and allegations which are made, and to weigh those up and bring the best of our journalism to bear in order to assess whether or not those things are true.
So do you think that fake news has eroded the trust of people in media houses, or are we losing the plot somewhere? What can the media houses do to stop this fake news explosion? Should there be editorial checks? Should there be guidelines? What is your take on that?
Yeah, so I think both of the things that you've said are right. So fake news has eroded trust on the part of the audience, and there is a danger of news organizations losing the plot. But actually what I say to people is this is a time when serious news organizations actually need to recommit to things that they've always taken seriously in terms of editorial guidelines, verification, fact-checking, second sourcing, and so on. So part of the response to fake news is not doing things differently, it's just ensuring that things that we've always done continue to be done as well as we possibly can.
So what are the tangible solutions to it? You know, right from using technologies to open source, how does that work?
Yeah, so again, some of the tangible solutions are really about recommitting ourselves to things that we've always done. But despite the fact that technology has made this area quite complicated and hotly contested, technology can help us. So we are using more open source techniques. We're working with journalists and communities outside the BBC who are able to bring to bear sort of forensic investigative techniques to help us tell stories and relate stories with a burden of proof that we've never been able to do before. And that's something which is positive about what's going on, rather than constantly falling into this sort of depressive, sort of defensive crunch and assuming that everything is negative.
You know, there's sort of an existential crisis that is happening right now in the media houses. You know, what do? Do you come out and say, okay, do you just come out and put out the facts, give out the information and say this is news? Or do you come out and say this is news, this is fake news? You know, there is a bit of a confusion. Can you any longer afford to be equivocal or impartial in your stand?
Right, okay, so there's a lot in there. And so I say absolutely it's really important for us to remain impartial, and that's in the conduct of our journalism. It's also being transparent about funding sources, ownership of media organisations, influence which is being brought to bear editorially. All of these things are becoming more and more important. So I don't think we should give up. I think we should be proud of what we stand for, and we should live up to those principles on a daily basis.
Jim, advertisers are skeptical about where their content appears, especially in such a volatile news ecosystem. What is the viability of an entirely ad-supported news business?
Yeah, I think that the fake news crisis from a commercial point of view is actually good for serious news brands, because advertisers were approaching the position where they didn't really care about where their adverts appeared, as long as the cost per thousand was at the lowest possible price. But actually, I've always said that context is really important, and that's something that in a fake news environment you want to offer 100% brand safety to advertisers. And I think particularly after a lot of the problems that entities like Facebook and Google have experienced in recent years, us being able to say you can advertise with the BBC or another well-regarded and recognised news organisation and be confident that your brand messaging is appearing in an environment which is not going to be contaminated, that's really important. It's also to our commercial advantage.
Yeah. So tell us about your relationship with your digital partners. Apple News, there's Facebook, and you know, the more digital partners you have in the picture, it also heightens the risk of fake news. So are you getting into any partnership or any collaborative effort where you can contain the spread of fake news?
Yeah, so we do have good relationships with Facebook, Google, YouTube, Apple News and Twitter and so on. I don't think those partnerships themselves increase the risk of fake news. We're very, very careful about branding and attribution of our stories on those platforms, so that people, and those are often new audiences that we're reaching, will see those as BBC stories, and hopefully that should help with the fake news issue rather than make things worse. But those relationships are good ones, but they're also ones that we are careful about as well, because each of these organisations in their different ways is facing very, very significant commercial and policy challenges right now. Yeah,
but do you think that these platforms are aware of the role they play in the news ecosystem?
I think they are rapidly becoming aware of the role that they play, rather belatedly, you might say. And there is a very, very big debate unfolding now pretty much in every country around the world about how the power of these platforms and the impact that they're having on national discourse and the way society works, how we should regulate those and work with those entities, because I think most governments and regulators are realising, as well as the organisations themselves, that things are a bit out of control.
Okay, all right, thank you so much for joining us, Jim.
Thanks very much for having me.
You're watching Storyboard. The role of tech in shaping the way in which we advertise has already been established. But how is technology going to aid advertising in the future? Well, we have this question answered as we speak to some of the prominent names from the world of technology on the sidelines of the recently held IAA World Congress in Kochi. Listen in.
The sheer logic of advertising makes this sentimental king buy things which he never needed.
We need to move our companies from CSR, corporate social responsibility, to make it RSC, responsible social corporations.
Brands can make the social change. Brands can help us to be better human beings, better friends.
We have Jonas Schellberg with us today on the show, and he's speaking, in fact, on a very interesting topic at the IAA Congress. It's game-changing ideas that will attract venture capitalists. Quite an interesting topic, Jonas. Tell us more about, how can India create game-changing ideas?
Well, I think you have the fundamenta. You're building most of the tech products for many of the world's largest and most famous companies. So I'm still just waiting for when are those spin-outs, when those individuals say, now we're not going to build it for IKEA, H&M or Uber, we're going to build our own perspective. And we're not going to build a product just for the Indian market. We're actually going to address the world as a market.
So, what are your tips on game-changing ideas for created for the Indian market that will take or make India take a note in like a global
well, I think for me there are
platform?
three main objectives. One is all successful companies have rapid growth. So it's basically how do you unlock growth? How do you drive more customers through the door on a day-to-day basis? Because that's something most of these successful companies all have in common. They're really good at growing companies. Number two, you really need to have a good product market fit. What pain and problem are you solving that no one has done before? So thinking outside the box and rethinking these things. How can you do something that the traditional industry is doing, but doing it today in a totally new way? And the third part is basically how do you innovate on cost? So if you look at most of the successful companies, they've rethought their cost structure. Uber has no driver, Alibaba has no inventory, Spotify has no cost of music. So really rethinking, how is the underlying fundament of doing your business? Because that enables you to do product cheaper and better.
So, we have the likes of, let's say, a TCS.
Yes.
Helping global brands or global products grow.
Yes.
To a great extent. We have consultants, many such consultants.
Yes.
In fact, Wipro is also there.
Yeah.
But when do we see an India having, let's say, a Skype or let's say an Uber? Or
I think it's just a matter of time. I think the biggest challenge today is that you have a great big domestic market.
Yeah.
So you build everything for your domestic market. I think the US had the same thing. China had the same thing as well. But then the US companies, expanded. Now we see the Chinese companies with Alibaba and so on, not just staying in China anymore, but addressing the whole world. I think that's the next stage of India, also addressing the next world, because I think you have the top talent. You can go to Silicon Valley, and most of the people I meet there are Indian or have moved from India, so I think there's an amount of talent here.
So what according to you is something that is lacking? What according to you is something? Do we need to think global? Do we need to probably generate ideas for the global market, or probably many of the Indian players are just sufficient to addressing an issue within such a large country? What is the problem?
I think there's not a problem. It's more about the mind shift. I think a lot of the younger population here, they're really striving to build something. They drive tradition. It's about having the guts and going out and building a company that will fail. If I look at myself, I've had some successes, but most of my companies have actually failed.
Yeah.
So it's about having that kind of hypothesis. I want to try something, and if it's successful, great. But most of the time, it's not successful.
But if you look at even the global tech giants, they are struggling within themselves to probably reinvent the consumer on a daily basis.
Yes.
Like Facebook is wondering how can they include stories on their platform, or some other platform is trying to include videos on their platform. So what is it that is going to be the game changer then?
I think there is constant game changing, because what you're talking about is that you have a great product. You can look at Skype, and then over time, there's something else that comes in. It's Lime, it's Zoom, it's something else, it's FaceTime. So there's always room for innovation that is beyond what was built before. Even if it was, state of the art when it was built, you constantly need to rethink your model. But I think that's the hard part for all companies. The more people you get on board, the more people love the existing product, and the more afraid you are to rethink what should be the new product tomorrow.
Yeah. So coming back to Skype, when when there was Skype, everyone for a video call, everyone would just by default go to Skype.
Yes.
But now every other platform offers that.
Yes.
So how is Skype really reinventing itself?
I think that's a very typical example. We sold the company eBay, eBay sold it to Microsoft, and the logical thing is you talk to the consumer, and the consumer, I would like to have more features. You add more features, the product gets more cluttery, over time, and then there's a new product that only does one thing really, really, really well,
Yeah.
and then people move to that. Because the hard part is so easy to add things into a product,
Yeah.
but taking out things is even more difficult.
So, but when you try to do everything, doesn't, don't you move away from what the core of the product is?
Yes.
It
But I think, yes, and that's the hard part, because you have a lot of smart people, and people want to develop that product. Maybe it had even been better to splitting Skype into 4 or 5 different products.
Yeah. So you're saying splitting Skype into 4 or 5 different
Could have been
products
an alternative.
Okay.
To really do it good, you could have done the chat bot that we did. Skype was, the Slack before, because a lot of people use the chat.
Yeah.
So the chat could have been Slack, the video could have been Zoom, it could have been so many different perspectives. But I think the easiest part is you want to cramp everything in and build one product, because that's the natural thing to do. And what I'm talking about is trying to do the unnatural, the unseen perspective is the hard part for every corporation. Because
Yeah.
that's
So what, according to you, should it do to really make it relevant to the consumer?
Skype?
Yes.
Well, I've left Skype nearly 10 years
Yeah.
ago, so I think that's up to
But
Microsoft to
since you
dis-
were one of the founding
Yeah, well, I had the luck to
people.
be there, and I think the challenge with all technology today, I think, they should really try to understand what is the essence, and maybe it's already too late.
And what about, the rest of the tech companies in the world? Since I said they were struggling with their own products,
Yeah.
their own offerings, making themselves relevant to the
Yeah.
consumer with technology changing so fast every day.
Yes, but I think that is one of the things for top management, and I think the challenge constantly for top management is that you focus on the existing product that you have today. And you should really consider, okay, how much time are we spending reinventing ourselves? And not just doing it the small step, but really trying to outline, what should it look like tomorrow? Because Facebook, again, were competed by Instagram, which was not a lot of features. They bought it, and they rethought it.
So what, according to you, should be one game-changing idea or one example that Indian companies should look at to probably change the game in the country?
Well, I think for India, I think the big challenge you have is to get the fundamenta for entrepreneurship in place, because there's a lot of rules and regulations and so on. So making it easier to become a tech entrepreneur is something that I would, really like to see here. Then I think, it's for the new entrepreneurs to decide, what those game-changing things are. But I think if you look at mobility, you look about, the sharing economy, I think, India could be a very clear part of that.
But do you think it is tough for an Indian startup to become like a big tech entrepreneur, or it's easy?
I think it's not harder for them than it is for anyone else. It's just there is not as many role models that have done it international yet.
Yeah.
But if you look at the population, you look at the talent, the competences, and what you're doing here with all the AI and things that you're doing for large tech companies, there should be a way of doing that for your own companies and spinning that out. But I think that's more of a mindset. Today, people are happy to work for a large corporation like TCS, and then they're working for someone else. It's, having the guts and saying, okay, I'm not going to take that great job, I'm going to do this on my own, and I'm maybe going to fail, and I'm going to try to build something unique. I think that is that's the next wave of mindset.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
The world is looking forward to 5G. We have Penny Baldwin and we have Manoj Khilnani from Qualcomm with us, discussing 5G with us today on the sidelines of the IAA World Congress. Both of you, welcome to CNBC-TV18. We have Mobile World Congress just in the next couple of days. Everyone, all the smartphone makers, the entire mobile ecosystem is looking forward to 5G. How does 2019 look for Qualcomm?
Well, 2019 is going to be the year of commercialization. We're going to see real products introduced in the marketplace and 5G in action after a very long period of R&D and investment. So we're very excited about being on the cusp of bringing products to the marketplace.
So you just unveiled the Snapdragon X55 just yesterday. Tell us, how is it going to change the world for a regular consumer?
It'll be much, much faster, much lower latency, making gaming experience, for instance, much more lifelike and real time. It will also significantly improve your camera capabilities. The resolution is fantastic. So it's quite the powerhouse jump in processing capability.
And how will it change the world for businesses and especially brands worldwide?
Well, the 855 will become the basis for all the 5G smartphones. So a lot of the XR experiences, VR experiences will be enabled on that chipset. So that's a pretty profound change because it really hasn't happened to date.
Okay. Manoj, 4G rollout in India took quite some time. What is going to happen as far as 5G is concerned?
I think what we've been seeing for the last couple of quarters is that there's a very, very strong intent, very strong motivation to push 5G out in India as soon as possible. I think we are hearing some dates and months around the spectrum auctions as well. So I think, the intent is really strong. And if everything goes as per the schedule, and let's say, the spectrum auctions happen this year, I think 5G should be a reality by next year, 2020.
Okay. Which industries, Penny, according to you, will benefit the most from 5G in 2019?
5G will influence healthcare, retail, energy, connected cars, so the automotive industry. It will be profound across virtually every industry because it connects not only people to people, but people to things and things to things. So imagine being able to communicate with your car, and your car can communicate with the electrical grid in a city, and doctors can perform remote health care because of the low latency of 5G. It's truly profound how pervasive the change will be.
So all I can see is that it's going to be an extremely dynamic year for Qualcomm, the next coming days, coming months. You are the chief marketing officer for an organization which speaks to businesses. Tell me, does it make your life or job difficult or easy?
It's neither difficult nor easy. It's just a different type of marketing challenge. And yes, while we appeal largely to the mobile ecosystem in most of our marketing efforts, we also do induce brand preference for our Snapdragon chipsets so that consumers prefer phones with Snapdragon built in.
Okay, so and then how do you communicate that value of a Snapdragon chipset to the consumer?
We communicate it directly to the consumer through a variety of channels, such as digital, but we also communicate it in partnership with our partners. So when new products are launched, the value proposition is an effort that reflects the combined input of both Qualcomm and our partner.
Okay. In your presentation, you mentioned how there are so many partners that you're already in touch with. There are so many other partners, especially the mobile phone makers, the smartphone makers, that you're already speaking to for 5G. Can you just tell us more about these partnerships, and when do we see the real rollout of 5G? How soon can we see it?
Well, you're going to see a lot of actual product samples at Mobile World Congress next week. So a number of our partners will be there, and you will see the introduction of new 5G smartphones the back half of 2019 for the most part, although some will be launched as early as April.
Okay. Manoj, I wanted to ask you, what about the Indian smartphone makers? Are you in talks with Indian smartphone companies for the 5G rollout?
See, 5G is too early right now, but to your question around Indian smartphone makers, you saw the 4G feature phone being launched last year. I think similar efforts will be made. I think right now the opportunity is to grow the base shift the base from feature phones to smartphones, because there's a still significant chunk of population sitting on feature phones. So we'll continue to focus on that efforts. And once I think India is 5G ready, definitely I think we'll continue to work with the phone makers to ensure that the transition happens to the 5G as well, both for 4G as well as for the feature phone makers.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks for speaking to us. Thank you. It is year 2019 and political parties and Desh ki Janta alike are excited about the upcoming general elections. But so are brands. In fact, many brands have launched their campaign around the upcoming general elections. On this week's notice board, we bring you all those campaigns that have already started riding the election wave. With that, it's a wrap on Storyboard this week. You can catch all of our content on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back same time next week. See you soon.